Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah Fairclough, and I'm a member of the Platform Solutions team here at Smart Simple. Today, I'm joined with Banky, another one of my team members. He's going to be discussing creating a reminder email for reports. So just a couple of things before I pass it over to Banky. The session is being recorded, and a copy of the video will be sent to you. And we love to hear your questions. We love to hear from you. We're just going to be answering the questions at the end, but please feel free to post throughout, and then Banky will get to them at the end. And now I'm going to pass it over to Banky. Thanks so much, everyone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Banky, and I'm also a member of the Platform Solutions team. I'm also joined here with Greg, who is my manager. So in today's webinar, I'm going to be talking about a workflow. And in particular, I'll be focusing on one that is used to create some sort of reminder emails for scheduled reports and send these emails to various users. So workflows in the Smart Simple platform are a set of repeatable tasks or steps used to automate and streamline your business processes within the system. These can include tasks to automatically either schedule payments or schedule reports, or send out reminder emails like the one that I'm going to be talking about today. So this right here is my grants demo system that I've created. And so let's imagine that an application is in progress and there are different users like applicants or staff members that are required to fill out reports throughout the application's lifecycle. These automated emails can be sent out to these users as a reminder to fill out these reports. And so our workflow basically includes various tasks that would send out those email reminders at different intervals prior to the date the report is actually due. And so also emails can be sent out to indicate that the reports are past due or that deadlines have been missed. Workflows can be created by the system administrator, and to get to your workflows, you just need to click on the menu icon and then go into the workflows. To create a new workflow, you need to click on the plus button. And in here, you select the type of workflow. You have to give the workflow like a name, just to indicate what the workflow is for. You can also include like a category so that the workflows are grouped into different categories and you can easily search for the workflows that you're looking for if you're trying to search for a workflow in your system. You can give a brief description describing what the workflow is going to be used for. And you can set a trigger on to determine when the tasks in the workflow are supposed to begin. And this can be, say, when the application is in pre-draft status or a report has been scheduled within the application. Some other options that can be configured when creating the workflow are something like a termination trigger. And this would be set for any workflows that schedule tasks for later in the future. What this termination trigger would do is it would cancel any pending tasks if they're no longer required. And if you want the workflow to terminate at a certain point, like in our example that I'm creating, where the report has been submitted or maybe the application status has been changed significantly, this termination trigger will then prevent any additional emails from being sent out. Some other options included are not really important for this particular workflow that I'm going to be talking about today, so I'm not really going to go through them. What I'm going to do now is for the workflow that I'm focusing on today, I'm going to work with one that has already been created just for the sake of time, and I'll go through all of the settings and tasks within this workflow. Going back into the workflow, as I've done here, you see that we've selected the type, which is the tracking activities, because we're tracking a level 2 record, which is the report within the application. We've given it a nice little name, put it in a category, and given a brief description of what the workflow is for. The trigger on currently is set to deactivate because I don't really want it to send out any emails to any users within my system. But in your case, or if you're trying to use it for the same purpose that I'm using it for, the trigger on can be maybe when the application is in, like I said, the pre-draft status or a report has been created. And we've also selected the termination trigger for when the report is submitted. And once you save, then you get brought to this page and the workflow is given a workflow ID that can be referenced later on. And so now that we've created, or now that we've seen what this workflow looks like here, we're going to go into the tasks. By default, every workflow has like a start and a complete point. And so you just need to create the tasks in between them for the process flow. And to create a new task, again, you just need to click on the plus button, and you need to select the name, select the type of task, give it a nice little description. You can even create a default task connector, which connects this particular task to any to the previous task that was created before this one. And you can assign different roles that are affected by this particular task. I'm going to go back into my workflow. And just as a heads up, any sort of field names or activity types or statuses referenced in this example are specific to my Smart Simple grant demo system. And so if you're trying to replicate this workflow in your own system, just check and make sure that you're using the correct field names and activity types and statuses specific to your own system. And so in your workflows, you don't have to say the same exact number of tasks or the same sort of timeframes within when these reminders are sent out to different users. So now that we're back in the tasks, I'll go through each of these tasks individually. The first task here is the initial delay. And this task will not necessarily have any action or function, but it will indicate that the workflow has started. And while you're looking through any workflow logs or workflow history, this task will let you know that this workflow has basically started. And then I'll use this toggle to go through all the individual tasks. So it's just like an initial delay. There's no message going out. There's nothing happening. It's just letting you know that the workflow has started. Going into the next task, this is the first action that would actually take place within your workflow. And so in my example, this task is basically sending out an email 6 weeks prior to when the report is due. And so I've named it the 6-week reminder to the staff. And the task type that I selected is an acknowledgement, which indicates that a message is being sent out to the user. I've also given it a nice little description and selected the affected user in this case, which would be the grant staff. Since the acknowledgement has been selected as the task type, you also need to edit the message template for the message that is being sent out. So we're going to have to select the message type. In this case, we're using an email, and it can be other kinds of messages. You can also insert some email templates. I'm just inserting a default one that was created, and you can create your own defaults or just use a blank template. You can include a from address or a CC address using some system variables like I've created here. You can add a nice little subject for the email that is being sent out. And this is just the body of what my example looks like. And if you even want to see what that looks like before it gets sent out, you can go ahead and preview it as well. You also have the option to add like a message header or add some file attachments. And if this option or button is toggled on, this basically saves an event and creates a record on the user's profile when this message is sent out. I'll go ahead and go through the next few tasks as well. So this next task, as we've named it, is a forward reminder, but this time it's actually going to a different user. This time it's going to the grant owner, the grantee, rather than the grant staff that the previous task was sent to. And so again, it's just a brief description what it's for, and we've also selected the acknowledgement as the task type. The message template also follows the same format, and it's similar to the previous one. And then the next task as well, also going to the grantee owner, which is the owner of the application. And it's a 1-week reminder that is getting sent out 1 week prior to when the report is due. The next couple tasks are tasks sending out emails on the due date of when the actual report is due. So the first one here is going to the grantee, and we selected them as the owner. And then the next one is going to the grant staff. And they're both going to get sent out on the date that the actual report is due. And finally, the last task before the workflow is completed is a task that actually changes the status of the report. And so if for whatever reason, the report was not filled out either prior to the due date or on the due date when it was supposed to be filled out, then the status of the actual report gets changed. And so we selected the target being the report that is supposed to be filled out, and we've set it to change the status of the report to being overdue. You can filter out some different types of applications that this task affects, and you can also filter out some applications that are in different statuses as well that are affected by this task. Now that we've gone through all of the different tasks within this workflow, I'd like to talk about the connectors. The connectors basically just connect one task within this workflow to the next task. And very nicely, our workflow has been created in a linear order. So one task just goes to the next, to the next, to the next. But that doesn't necessarily always have to be the case. You can have tasks that branch out to other tasks, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in a linear order like this. So again, the first connector just connects the start to the initial delay, and this doesn't have any options. You don't need to change any of these options, and you can just leave them as default. The next one, however, excuse me, connects the initial delay to the 6-week reminder that's going out to the staff. And we selected the trigger date as the due date of the report. But you also notice here that we've added a delay of -42, indicating that this is getting sent out 6 weeks before the report is actually due. And that's why we've selected -42 days. You can choose like a custom time that you'd like the email to get sent out in the day. And you can also include business days only. So that would obviously get accounted in the number of days that you're adding as the delay. You can include holiday calendars as well. We'll go ahead and take a look at the next connector, which connects to the 4-week reminder. And again, we selected -28 days to reflect that it's going out 4 weeks before the due date of when the report is due. Again, the next connector indicates that it's being sent out 1 week before, and that's why it's -7 days, indicating that it's 7 days prior to the report being due. And then just like the tasks, the next two connectors connect the 1 week reminder to the due date that is being sent, the due date reminder is being sent to the grantee, the trigger date being the day of when the report is due, and then the delay is 0, meaning that it's going to get sent on that actual day. So also the due date reminder for the staff following the same settings as well. So again, if for whatever reason the report does not get filled out, the change to status connector basically waits 1 day until after the due date of the report. And so if after the 1 day delay, the report is still not filled out, then it changes the status of the report to being overdue. And finally, this last connector just connects that to the complete, just indicating that the workflow has completed. A few other options that you can have in your workflow settings include the enable reorder that basically lets you rearrange the order in which the tasks are going to get processed. And then you can also import and export some tasks in between workflows within your system as well. With the workflow diagram here, you can see a process flow of all of the tasks within your workflow, including the connectors in between them. So this just shows you the process flow of the entire workflow. The pending queue would show you a list of any upcoming tasks, but because I haven't triggered mine to be on yet, we don't have any tasks in my pending queue or my history, which should show you a list of completed tasks. But I'm going to show you an example of a different workflow that I've created and triggered in the past. And so it's showing you, who made that action that triggered that workflow, the particular task name within that workflow, and the task type, letting you know that it's been completed. So this is an example of what it can look like once all of those tasks have been completed within the workflow. So again, I just want to mention that your workflows do not necessarily need to be configured the exact same way that mine has been configured, but these workflows are basically just used to automate a bunch of tasks for records in your system. Thank you so much, and let me know if you have any questions. I'm just going to stop my screen share now.
Great, thanks so much, Benki. It looks like we do have a couple questions. Is there an easy way for all of the email reminders to be reset to the new due date?
I can step in here, Sarah, Banky. This is a great question, Erica, and the configuration that's currently in place for yourselves there, having to reset the status and re-trigger things, is probably as close to best practice as we would suggest, because what you have to do is terminate all of the pending workflow tasks in the first place. You don't want to be able to essentially have those sitting there and create new report reminders and re-trigger things and duplicate those efforts. Those things can be triggered. So a workflow like that could be triggered from a program manager using a system call to handle that once the status has been changed back and forth. Or you could do a batch update to do something like that. There are other ways, manually specifying dates on a case-by-case basis, but it gets into the realms of having a huge amount of manual intervention there. But if there is a specific question that you'd like us to discuss a little bit further, the platform solutions team would be more than happy to have a chat with you after the webinar.
Can you explain more about using the report created trigger for this workflow?
That would be the initiation task. So where the actual workflow started from. In this particular case, it would have, the report would have been created through the approval process on the level 1 record, so on the grant application itself. And as it happens, that's going to be a topic that our colleague Morgan is going to be covering on Thursday. So as part of that workflow, it's going to create a host of different tasks, or a host of different activities, reports, grant agreements, payments, and so on. It will create the progress reports in a pre-draft or in a scheduled status. And it's on that status that our report reminder workflow is being triggered. So initially, when the reports are created, the status that the reports are created in, it's triggering that second workflow on in our demo environment here, and creating all of those pending tasks and those pending workflow reminders as well.
Great, thank you. Where would somebody go to find a workflow if it's already been created, and how can they edit that workflow?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll jump in here and share my screen. So the easiest way, well, the primary way here is through the global settings menu. And this will be restricted to global administrators or system administrators that have access to the workflows themselves. So it's through the global settings icon down to the workflow system process. And there's a couple of different options when you're within the workflow pane here. I'm seeing my grants manager level 1 category because that's the previous one that I was working on. And as Banky said, it's always best to group and categorize your workflows in an order or in a way that they can be easily navigated. If you're stuck or if you're not getting any lists, you can always change the category back to all workflows, and you'll see a full list of all of the workflows that have been defined. Now here we can search for a couple of different things. We can do a wildcard search, for the word grant, and we'll get any reference to that particular word. We can also then search for, a status. If we know there's a status trigger, we can again search for that wildcard, and we'll get the approved or references to the approved word in this particular case. A way that I like to search through workflows, if I'm trying to find a specific task, is actually to search for the task name itself. So on the left-hand side here, we can actually see the list of all of the automated tasks that are within the platform or within this particular demo environment. If I'm trying to find an email, I can search for the acknowledgement task, and it'll give me a list of all of the acknowledgements. I can then filter the task list as well by email. So it'll group all of the emails at the top of the screen. And then I can come in and I can edit that individual email message in this particular case. So with a couple of clicks, it's easy enough to find. The benefit as well to naming things in a way that's easy to read is it makes it easier for you to manage. So when you're looking at your workflow histories from a grants record itself, it'll always give you the task name and the workflow name. So it makes it a little bit easier to navigate, to search for those records if the information is clean and clear.
That looks like all the questions we currently have. But if anybody thinks of any questions afterward that they'd like to discuss, please feel free to reach out to platformsolutions@smartsimple.com. We're always happy to hear from you. And if there's any feedback about the webinar topic today, always like to hear it. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks to Greg and Binky for the presentation and answering our questions. And we do have another webinar coming up on Thursday, like Greg mentioned, that is being hosted by Morgan. That's going to be going over common workflow tasks for the awarded status. So if you haven't registered, definitely recommend that. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much everyone for joining us.